What's going on, Intermediate Guitar? I'm Ben. How's everybody doing today? This lesson will pick back up where we left off on the CAGED system. Today, we're going to be talking about the triads that we're pulling out of the CAGED system and what we can do with those. A lot of times people will talk about pulling the triads out of these chords, and we're left wondering, what am I supposed to do with those? There's many things we can do with those. Today we'll cover just a snippet of it so as to not make this video too terribly long. Let's dive right into it. The last time we were together, last week, we were using a chord progression of E minor, G, to D, to A. We will stick with this chord progression just so it all ties together. So with this chord progression, last time we talked about how to pull the CAGED chords out and keep it within a certain section of the neck. In the case of last week, we used this, so we did E minor as the A minor shaped E minor chord. And then we did the C shaped G chord. Say that 3 times fast. The G-shaped D chord. And in this regard, we used the triad down at the bottom. For the A, we could also use the C-shaped A chord. And in this case, we'll be using this shape today, just to keep it sort of consistent. So that is our chord progression. When we talk about pulling triads out, specifically the 1s, the 3s, and the 5s. You can use dyads, and I'll show you here in just a moment how that could also work. But let's talk about pulling these triads out. Typically, the triads can be found anytime that there's a 1, a 3, and a 5, one right after the other. It doesn't necessarily matter which one's on the bottom, that just means it's an inversion, but it's still a triad. If instead I were to take, say, a 1, 5, 1, in the case of my E minor chord here, that's in the A minor shape, down at the very bottom, the bottom 3 strings, that's the 1, the 5, and the 1. Okay? That's just a dyad. There's no 3rd in there. So I probably wouldn't target that. It doesn't have enough melodic quality, and it's not a full chord semantics. It's kind of a chord, but it's not a full chord. You could argue one way or the other about it, but we're not here to talk about dyads. Instead, up at the very top of that chord, the top 3 strings, your E string, your B string, and your G string, respectively, we have a perfect triad. Where our ring finger is there on the 9th fret of the G string, that's our root. Where our middle finger is at on the 8th fret B string, that's our minor 3rd. And where our index finger is at on the high E string, the 7th fret, that is the 5th. So that's the triad that we're going to use here. The same can be said on our C-shaped G chord. The wonderful thing about the C shape is it's almost entirely made up of triads, meaning that there's 2 triads in this chord that we can choose from. In the bass, we have the 1 that's on the A string. On the D string, we have the 3rd. And we have the 5th on the G string. That's a triad. Up at the top, where we steal that D shape from, we're just missing the root note back here, we have a 5, a 1, a 3, meaning it's a second inversion because the 5th is on the bottom. But that's also a nice triad. And that's the one that we want to hang on to. So that'll be the next shape. That is going to be on the 7th fret of the G string, the 8th fret of the B string, and the 7th fret of the high E string. So far we have this one from our E minor shape. We have the D shape for G. Once we get to D, that's the G-shaped D. So for this one, at the very base of it, on the 10th fret of the low E string, that's my 1. I have my 3rd on the 9th fret of the A string, and my 5th on the 7th fret of the D string. So I have a triad there. I also have a triad on this back wall here. That's going to be the 5th, the 1, and the 3rd. So a second inversion triad. That's probably the one that we'll take, but I'll show you in this case it might be okay to use a dyad. At the very top of this chord, we have a 1, we have a 3rd, and a 1. Since it has the 3rd in it, that's an okay dyad. If it had just the 5th in it, it doesn't have the same melodic quality as a 1 and a 3 does. There's just enough melodic quality to this sort of dyad that it conveys that it's a major or a minor chord, whereas those 5 chords don't. And it's literally just because they don't have the 3rd in it. So in this case, we could use either that back wall triad, that second inversion, and that's literally barring the 7th fret of the D, the G, and the B strings for the true triad, or we could have the dyad up at the top where we have, that's the 7th fret on the G and the B strings and the 10th fret on the high E strings. And I may use this, I might cycle kind of back and forth, but we'll see. Finally, we have our A note, and for that, once again, I said that we were going to use the C shape. It's the same concept as the G shape, that C-shaped G that we had earlier. This is the C-shaped A. All of your triads are the same here. You have the 3 on the bottom, 1, 2, 3, and the 3 at the top, 1, 2, 3. And respectively, it's the 1, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 5th, the 1st, the 5th, the root, and the 3rd on the top. And so that's the shape we'll take. This is really a great way to approach any sort of, let's say you're playing along to a backing track, or you have a buddy who's playing the open position chords. This is a great way to play along with them without you both being in the same register. So it doesn't sound really muddy, it sounds like there's 2 guitars. So for example, I brought my loop pedal today. If we have our chord progression, that was E minor, G, D, A, we could go E minor, G, D, A. And then we would use our triads that we just pulled out of our caged chords over the top. We could use the full caged chords, but if we arpeggiate the triads, you'll see what I'm talking about and what it does for it. We'll start with the chords first, and then I'll move into the triads. And here should be our loop. So here's our chords. E minor, G, D, A. And you can already tell, since it's in a different register, it's clear. Now just the triads. That's the dyad. And that last triad I pulled out is the triad from the E-shaped A chord, which is the middle finger, the pinky, and the index finger. So from that shape, that's the 5th, the root, and the 3rd. It's another second inversion. But it sounds really nice after the D. It's got a nice resolve to it. So that is how we pull out triads. We can also do this in other locations, and once you're familiar with your cage shapes and where those triads specifically are, this is definitely something that you can do very quickly. The other example we used last time was taking the chords from this sort of area, that's from the 3rd fret to the 7th fret, and I believe we had our E minor being in that D minor shape there. The G we used the E-shaped bar chord for, and the D we used the C shape for, which really this is just the extension of your regular D chord. This is the rest of it. And then finally for the A we had the G-shaped A, which the G-shaped A is just like the D. It's the extension of the regular A chord. So taking those triads from this area, we would use, well, the D shape is already the triad. That's the 5th, the root, and the 3rd up at the very top. From the G shape, or I'm sorry, the E-shaped G, you would take the top 3 strings of this. That's the 3rd fret of the high E, the 3rd fret of the B, and the 4th fret of the G string. And then ipso facto, it's just the D shape for D and A. And because these are unisons, you'll get to see why it's always nice to not play necessarily in tandem or in the same harmonic register as your other guitar player. You'll see how it'll kind of stand out, and then it'll start to blend. So let's try that out. We have our E minor, G, and then D. And you can hear how as soon as we got to that D and the A, it's the same chord. So if I'm not arpeggiating it, meaning to pick through those notes, it really just kind of blends in together. So when you have 2 guitar players playing the same exact chords, one of you needs to do something different. I know a lot of people tend to go for the bar chords. E minor, G, and that's fine, but those bar chords, once again, especially in the bass, it's 1, 5, 1. There's no harmonic quality down at the base of those notes. It's really all at the top. So if that's the case, just use the top. Use the top of those. Sounds so much better than the bar chords, and especially over somebody else playing, or if you have a loop going or whatever. And you can hear how it harmonizes really well. Though the wonderful thing about caged and chords in general is those are using what we call chord tones. Chord tones because those are the tones that make the chord. They also happen to be the excellent notes for when you're playing lead to pull out of, to let everybody know that you're playing along with the chord. We never want to be playing just scales up and down and guessing what notes we're playing. It sounds a lot better when we target the notes of each chord as it passes by, and in doing so, it makes everything that much more musical. Caged is a really great roadmap for doing that, and especially pulling out these triads. So, for practice this week, what I would definitely recommend doing is running through your caged shapes. There's only 5, so this shouldn't be that difficult. And if it seems like it's that difficult, just take your time with it. Rome wasn't built in a day, and you're not going to learn how to play guitar in a day either. So, taking those caged chords, I would start dissecting them. Find out what they are in the scale. If your regular caged chord is just a chord, just remember it's all 1s, 3s, and 5s. What you're trying to do is find out where those 1s, 3s, and 5s are. Taking note of where the dyads are, the 1s and the 5s, where they link up. Specifically, that's 1, 5, 1. That's not a triad, that's a dyad. Find all your triads and get comfortable with using them. Over a chord progression, there's many on YouTube you can find, or you can create your own, grab a loop pedal, use the camera on your phone and record yourself playing, and find those triads. Find the different triads for each one, each chord. Let's say you've got a 4-chord song like we just did. There's at least 5, because there's 5 caged chords, at least 5 places for you to find a triad for that one chord. In doing so, you're definitely going to start increasing your fretboard fluency and getting accustomed to finding those shapes. Down in the comments, let me know what you guys want to see. We do have our backing tracks up on our YouTube now, Intermediate Guitar, Leveling Up on YouTube. We are now on TikTok and Instagram under the same names, Intermediate Guitar. Find us there on all the platforms. It's a pleasure as always. I'm Ben with Intermediate Guitar. Appreciate you guys.